Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
For the record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Today is Monday, the 26th day of March, 2018. I trust that everyone had an enjoyable weekend. And while I'm trusting that, I know that there were several families who didn't have an enjoyable weekend because there were a couple of untimely and unfortunate deaths this weekend as well. And our prayers and our condolences go out to those families who are now mourning the loss of loved ones. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. For the Record is a show produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I am your host, Orit Connor, and you're welcome to join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 until 9:30. Our phone lines are always open. There's always someone there waiting to take your calls. You can call us on our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flow. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. Of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, you can email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. In addition to that, we have a WhatsApp number. That number is 925-3261. We encourage you to send us a text message or leave us a voicemail, and the contents of those text messages will be read over the air during the course of the show, or the voice message will be played over the show as well. So we encourage you to participate in the conversation, and we know you can do that as well because on Friday we had an excellent show where we had open mic for the full 2 hours of the show, and the phone lines were lit up practically for those entire 2 hours. The phone lines were lit up. And again, I want to thank you for participating. Thank you for making For the Record the show that it has become as well. Of course, today being Monday, it is the day that we have assigned to the government to appear on For the Record. And it is my pleasure to have in the studio with me this morning Mr. Austin Harris, MLA for the constituency of Prospect, and he is also the counselor in the Premier's Ministry of Human Resources, Immigration, and Community Affairs. So without any further ado, Mr. Harris, good morning, sir. Welcome to For the Record. I think on your last appearance on here, I happened to be off island, so I missed the opportunity to converse with you on that occasion. Welcome to the show, sir.
Good morning to you, OC. It is a pleasure to be a guest once again on For the Record, and particularly with you as host. Certainly, yes, you are correct. I've been here, I think, on at least 2 occasions whilst you were off on leave. And I want to thank, certainly, Ms. Donna Bush for facilitating those conversations. But there's nothing quite like OC on For the Record, so I'm looking forward to today's discussion with you. And thank you again for allowing me to be here with you.
Thank you very much. And we have a lot to talk about. What I'm going to do initially, I know one of our listeners on Friday called in and expressed her continuing concern about garbage collection.
Yes.
And we have a release from Department of Environmental Health, DEH, and it reads, the Department of Environmental Health wishes to apologize to the residents of Grand Cayman and Cayman Brac for the lengthy delays in their garbage collection services since the start of the week. That would have been last week. Although garbage has been picked up in some communities, the following areas are still affected in Grand Cayman. They are Crew Road, Shamrock Road, Prospect Drive, Hurst Road, College Close to Windward Drive, Tall Tree to Wilty Drive to Northward Entrance via Shamrock Road, Hudson and Fig Tree Drive, North Sound Estates to Moonbeam Drive, Pedro Castle Road to Spots Newlands, Frank Sound, Homes, Ocean Club to Newlands, and Midland Acres to John McLean Drive. It goes on to say the delays in collection have been caused by several issues, including a mechanical breakdown of the 2 garbage trucks that are assigned to Cayman Brac. The DEH has been working tirelessly throughout the week to ensure that normal collection resumes in the shortest possible time. Garbage pickup in Cayman Brac resumed yesterday, that was the 22nd of March 2018, in scheduled areas, while collection of outstanding areas in Grand Cayman will begin Saturday, the 24th of March 2018. The DEH urges residents who continue to experience non-collection of their garbage to call the offices in Grand Cayman and Cayman Brac. That number is 949-6696 or 916-4201. I will repeat those numbers, 949-6696 or 916-4201 respectively. So that means for Grand Cayman, the number is 949-6696. For Cayman Brac, it is 916-4201. Or you can email dehcustomerservice@gov.ky. So we encourage you to call in because we know that this week we will have a holiday starting on Friday with Good Friday. Then we're into Easter. The camping out, the picnics and everything will begin as well. So I'm sure that people are expecting to have a service. But in the event that there is some disruption in the pickup service, we want to encourage you as residents, as citizens of the Cayman Islands, to do your part as well. And if there is no pickup, if you can't take your garbage to the dump itself, then store it in such a way that the dogs or the animals can't get to it, that it is secure, so that when the pickup actually takes place, that it won't be scattered all over the place. Mr. Harris, you have anything that you want to add to that?
No, I think that was sage advice, particularly in terms of dealing with some of the delays in garbage collections, which the government acknowledges has taken place. And of course, the press release that you read outline what some of those delays involve, whether it be mechanical breakdowns on the sister islands or staff shortages here in Grand Cayman. But I particularly like the comment that was made, because I think you're dead on accurate. Sometimes delays will happen for a variety of reasons. But persons, particularly in neighborhoods, not every apartment complex has a properly situated garbage disposal area. Not every apartment complex has sufficient garbage containers. So we encourage residents to obviously to seal their garbage bags tightly, whether it be in a knot or otherwise. It's really no major expense to pick up a garbage pail, a 55-gallon garbage pail with a cover, because what that does is it avoids, as you stated, the dogs or other animals going after that garbage, the chickens in particular. They can create quite chaos. And what you put out in the morning as a garbage bag by the evening could be littered across the entire neighborhood. And that creates an unsightly but also an environmentally unpleasant situation for your community. So there is a degree of, I think, responsibility that I think residents can play to assist in ensuring that garbage stays where you put it. But certainly the government apologizes for the delays in garbage collection. But again, I also want to thank the DEH for quickly addressing the situation, for keeping the public informed, and also seeking to rectify the situation, certainly over the weekend, which you stated in that press release that was issued on Friday. Garbage collection commenced in earnest on Saturday morning and progressed throughout the entire weekend. We acknowledge that not only do we have to collect the garbage that may have been delayed, but also we have to continue that, particularly leading into this weekend's Easter weekend, which is also a very popular event for locals, camping and otherwise.
Yep, and I know they have been active because I've heard the garbage trucks out like 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
Yes. Since this release was put out as well. Okay, Mr. Harris, I think we have about 4 minutes before we go to a commercial break. I'm sure that this has been talked about before, but I think it is important for the public to understand, because I have heard comments not as positive as they should be about your trip to the UK for training and to observe the whip's office in the UK House of Commons or the UK Parliament. Yes. In terms of what goes on there. And despite the fact that we have a small legislative assembly here, the numbers do not dictate the procedures that must be in place. Indeed. In order to communicate with your colleagues as well as with other members of the Legislative Assembly. And let's talk about that, please.
Well, I thank you for that opportunity, and certainly I've heard some of those comments, and whilst I like to think that I've been successful in addressing some of the negative criticisms related to that, I stated on a previous show here on For the Record that there's a misconception that surrounds perhaps politicians in Cayman. Many people believe that the one and only hurdle that politicians have to cross is the one of getting elected. And after they get elected, they automatically know how to do every job, regardless of whether they've done it before or not. Mm-hmm. As you will undoubtedly accept, in order to be successful at any new job, a degree of training is required, and that is no different at the political level as it is at perhaps the executive or supervisory level. I was privileged to have been appointed as government whip for the coalition government. I think that is different than party whip, which a lot of persons have been, stating, but also not necessarily incorrectly, because the whip is generally a role that goes to a member of a party or a dominant party. But because the government that we have today is a true coalition government made up of all three sides, I was appointed by that government as its whip. Quite rightly so, there is a significant difference in terms of the size and of Cayman's legislative assembly and parliamentary process as compared to, say, the UK process. I am responsible only for whipping, as they say, the backbench, which consists of 4 members, including myself. Now, that number is relatively small, but what is involved in it? It involves knowing all of the government motions so that I can explain it to other members of the backbench who may not sit on cabinet. Those members may have questions specific to those government motions. I have to be able to understand the motions in such a way that I can explain it to others. Mm-hmm. There is a role that creates an opportunity or building bridges between the government and the opposition so that we can understand obviously what their needs are in their constituencies so that we can meet those needs. Whilst there may be that traditional viewpoint that there's an aggressive position between government and opposition, that really isn't the case, and I don't believe, or nor does the government believe, that there needs to be that place. We have private members' motions allowed by the opposition members, and part of that whip's role is to facilitate communication between what is it the opposition needs or wants that the government can provide. In many cases, and certainly we've been to the House now 3 times since being elected, and in all 3 occasions, we have conducted ourselves as partners, 19 elected members, as opposed to the government versus the opposition. So there's a role to be played where that is concerned. There are differences in how the whip's rule operates in the United Kingdom than perhaps it operates here in the Cayman Islands. One key area is in the United Kingdom, the whip really kicks into action every time there's a legislative assembly sitting, whenever you go to Parliament. There's really no role to play outside of keeping members informed when you're not in the legislative assembly. But in the United Kingdom, for example, the whip actually creates the business agenda for the days that you're in the assembly. In the Cayman Islands, we have a business committee that's made up of the premier, the deputy premier, the leader of the opposition, and others, and they create that agenda for the day. But the whip's role is to also assist on the government side in determining the order of speakers. So everyone knows when they're going to speak, what they're going to speak on, to make the legislative process much more efficient. And again, there's no one to tell you how this is done. In the Cayman Islands, the role of the whip has existed since about 2001, but it has largely operated on an informal basis. So the majority members of the government would obviously identify a whip. There would be no public notice of this. There would be no formal operational code of conduct for that individual. It was really by the seat of your pants kind of thing. What are we doing today and how can this one member of the government help? The purpose of the UK trip was to get a baseline understanding on the proper operation of that role and to take what has been largely an informal process and formalize it. So I spent 2 weeks, I think a valuable 2 weeks, gaining some valuable insight into the function of the whip's office. I met with both members of the House of Lords as well as the House of Commons, persons with far significant political acumen and experience, and how that role actually plays a vital function within the Parliament, or in our case, the Legislative Assembly. So it was extremely valuable, and I hope to apply that recently gained knowledge to, again, making our Legislative Assembly and parliamentary role much more efficient for the betterment of the people of the Cayman Islands.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mr. Harris. Very, very clear explanation. Folks, please stay tuned. We're going to a commercial break. When we return, the conversation will continue with MLA and Councillor Mr. Austin Harris. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We're about 10 minutes before we go to our 8 o'clock news. It is my pleasure to have in the studio with me this morning Mr. Austin Harris, MLA, who represents the constituency of Prospect, and he is also the councillor in the Premier's Ministry of Human Resources, Immigration and Community Affairs. I'm going to throw the mic right back over to Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris.
Thank you very much, OC, again, and certainly again a privilege to be here, and good morning to members of the listening audience who are just now tuning in. Before we jump into the discussion, the primary topic that which I came here to discuss, we want to just take us back to the issue of garbage for a moment. It was my pleasure over the weekend to lead a group of about 5 or 6 people, members of the Prospect community, and beginning a cleanup effort along the east-west arterial, more commonly known as the Prospect Bypass. We had a small number of hands. The goal was to complete at least from the Thomason Roundabout up to Chime Street. We got about halfway done, but certainly a motorist will be able to see a very tidy bypass. We will continue those efforts going into the Easter weekend so that we can obviously complete the job. But I just want to continue to encourage community members that there is a great deal that can be done at the individual level, starting almost solely with looking after the trash in your own community and certainly in your own home. You talked about, of course, the garbage containers that are kept at the top of the road. You want to make sure they're in good working order. You want to make sure, whenever possible, there are lids so this trash won't be ravaged by dogs and chickens. There will be delays from time to time with the Department of Environmental Health, but there is still much that we can do as a community to keep those communities clean. I want to thank the 5 or so persons who came out and assisted me on Saturday from the Prospect community. Of course, their names have been posted on social media, Facebook, my Facebook page. There have been, a number of comments and shares. So, but I definitely want to thank those community members who came out and gave us the support. We will continue the effort in Prospect, working in conjunction with the Prospect and Red Bay Community Group, which consists of 400 members of the community, a truly fantastic and dynamic organization. And we're prepared, and we will continue to do our part to keep our neighborhoods and constituencies clean. But there's a great deal that can be done by residents themselves, just within their own immediate sphere. Not asking you to go above and beyond. Certainly, by all means, if there are cleanup efforts and you have some time, then by all means, more hands make work light. But certainly, we are asking, at the very least, to be responsible or take responsibility for your own immediate area. And if every homeowner did that all the way down the street, we would start to see some significant differences in our communities.
Okay.
And, keeping a tidy area is a part of the Caymanian way of life. So we're not asking persons to, to do something out of the ordinary, but we are asking for assistance. And for those that do lend assistance, we are most grateful.
I know. In the most recent sitting of the Legislative Assembly, there was a question that related to the lighting of the east-west arterial.
Yes.
Any updates on that? I know that there was some indication that some studies were being done to look at the best options, because ideally, lighting would not be ready until they were able to utilize the 4 lanes,
Correct.
2 in each direction.
Correct. A large part of the reason why the lighting on the east-west arterial is sparse is because, to your point, the government, previous administrations created what is the service roads, what exists right now, the 1 lane in each direction. But the plan is to create 4 lanes, 2 in each direction, with a medium down the center, much like what we see happening on the Linford-Pearson Highway and elsewhere. Because that work has not started or been completed, the lighting in many cases has been delayed. We acknowledge, however, that we cannot allow ourselves to wait 2 or 3 years until that road construction begins to start addressing the needs of putting in place adequate lighting. Certainly, I want to thank the teamwork of both the NRA, the National Roads Authority, and Caribbean Utilities Company for installing a number of lights along that road, particularly heading into the Newlands constituency on towards Hearst Road. We are also looking at installing a number of LED lights from both the Tomlinson roundabout up until the Prospect Primary School. Obviously, discussions are being had between the NRA in terms of what sort of temporary lighting can fit the bill and work to complement what will become permanent lighting once that road work has begun and is completed. But the government does acknowledge that there are certain black spots, if you will, that are completely dark at night. And obviously in a country where exercise is important, we have a number of walkers that traverse that road. I will ask, however, for those persons who go walking, if they would wear reflective and lightly colored, so to speak, clothing. I've driven that road many times at night, and whilst I see a lot of persons exercising, they love black. And yes, whilst black may be slimming, it doesn't do a heck of a lot to protect that individual from oncoming traffic.
Yes.
If you insist on wearing black, then certainly you can get a number of reflective attachments that you can stick to your clothes or otherwise,
or even flashing lights.
Or
that
flashing
you can
lights.
attach to.
Exactly. We want to keep constituents and citizens safe, and certainly there's a role for the government to complete. But likewise, they too can help make that job a little easier. But going back to the question of lighting, we are acknowledging that lighting is sparse on that road, and it is something we hope to correct in the very near future.
Okay. And the other appeal that you would want to make to walkers and cyclists as well, that while there is a cycling lane and a walking lane there, those lines are merely artificial. There's nothing that stops a vehicle from going beyond those lines. So it is extremely important that you make yourselves visible
Yes.
while walking or running or cycling, on those roads as well.
I think that's an
important.
absolutely valuable point, OC. They are artificial lines. The NRA can be congratulated for designating walking and cycling lanes, but to your point, there are bad drivers all across Cayman. Some will pay attention, some will not. Some may not even obviously mean to strike a pedestrian, but a lot of that comes down to visibility. So again, if you're not going to wear lightly colored or reflective clothing, then certainly there are options in which members of the public can do to keep themselves safe, whether it be flashing lights, reflective clothing, inserts that can be, worn, vests I've seen worn by persons. Anything, if you're going to walk at night, and we accept that nighttime is a lot cooler than daytime, we want you to get your exercise. We want you to do it as safely as possible. But work with us as we continue to improve the lighting in that area, which is a top priority for all of us.
Okay. And I have 1 minute to go, so I guess I can put this little tidbit in. I read an article yesterday in, I think it was in BBC, and it had to do with headlights. Yeah. And what they're saying now is the more advanced headlights that are being installed in cars are really contributing to blinding oncoming drivers.
Okay.
So despite the fact that we complain about people not dipping their headlights, in addition to that, even when they dip them,
yes,
because of the quality of the headlights now, they're blinding people, and sometimes it can happen, 5-10 seconds before you actually recover your eye. Your
indeed, we've seen that challenge, the introduction of LED headlighting, yes. And whilst it does improve the visibility for certain drivers, we have to be cognizant of that fact, that it does have that blinding effect on incoming traffic as well as pedestrian traffic as well. So, again, we encourage motorists and pedestrians to act responsibly when utilizing the roadways.
Okay, folks, we're going to our 8 o'clock news. Please stay tuned. When we return, the conversation will continue with MLA and Councillor Mr. Austin Harris, and we, of course, encourage you to join us in the conversation as well. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back immediately after the 8 o'clock news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I want to remind you that it is my pleasure to have in the studio with me this morning Mr. Austin Harris, MLA and Councillor. He's the MLA who represents the constituency of Prospect in our Legislative Assembly, and he's the Councillor in the Premier's Ministry of Human Resources, Immigration and Community Affairs. I want to remind you our phone lines are open. You can call us on our toll-free number, provided courtesy of Flow. That toll-free number, 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. You can email us at fortherecord. That is one word, for the record, at candw.ky, or you can WhatsApp us on 925-3261. If you have any questions, any observations that you want to present to Mr. Harris, we'd be more than happy to hear from you. I also want to remind you that today is the day that our new governor arrives in the Cayman Islands. So there will be, I'll let Mr. Harris tell us some of the things that are going to be taking place. But that's what we have him here for this morning.
That's right. Yes, OC, we are welcoming our newest governor to the Cayman Islands today. I understand he's going to arrive at Owen Roberts Airport at around 11:30 this morning. That will be followed by a swearing in. Of course, as a new governor, he too must be sworn into the position, and that will take place at 3 p.m. at the Legislative Assembly of the Cayman Islands. Obviously, members of the public are encouraged to attend, those who can. They will be seated in the gallery. And then at 6 p.m., there will be a public reception held for the new governor. All members of the community are invited to attend. That will be held at the Pedro St. James Castle, and that kicks off at 6 p.m. There'll be some entertainment, there'll be some refreshments, but also primarily an opportunity to meet one-on-one with the new Cayman Islands governor who arrives today. So we encourage members of the public who would like to come out and receive the new governor to do so, starting as early as 11:30 at the airport, 3 o'clock at the Legislative Assembly for the swearing in, or after 6 p.m. At Pedro Castle, where there will be a brief reception, which again the public is invited to attend. But we're looking forward to his arrival. We understand there was a delay in his arrival, and certainly we extend our thoughts, prayers, and condolences to the new governor. I think his father passed away.
Yes.
So obviously some tragic circumstances in coming over, but we hope to receive him with some of our own traditional Cayman kind, and hopefully there'll be more smiles than tears today. But certainly encouraging the public, those who are able, to come out and welcome our new governor as he arrives at 11:30 this morning.
Okay. We want to continue on your agenda in terms of some of the things you want to talk about, Mr. Harris.
Well, obviously, OC, the primary reason for being with you this morning is to talk about the government's national agenda to combat crime. Every member of the government, and I dare say every member of the opposition, campaigned on the issue of crime and creating safer communities. The government acknowledges that, and crime featured predominantly in the budget session that took place in the Legislative Assembly last November. We have seen a spike in crime in a number of areas that are not used to it, not least of which the Red Bay and Prospect areas in recent weeks. It's a serious state of affairs. Persons who feel afraid to walk from their car at night to their front door. Persons who are cautious about leaving their business premises and going home, or persons even going out for a night on the town for fear of being robbed. This is not as the Premier stated in the Legislative Assembly, this is not the Caymanian way of life, and it is something that will not sit with the government. We are tackling the issue of crime very seriously, and that started, of course, in November with some $270 million being budgeted for national security. Now, when we look at national security, this $270 million will be spent in a number of different ways. First and foremost, we have committed 75 new police officers to the RCIPS over the next 3 years. They will be rolled out 25 new officers every year for the next 3 years. As of February of this year, some 17 new officers have been hired and have entered the ranks of the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. A third of the overall policing budget on national security will go towards, again, fulfilling the campaign promises of delivering safer communities. And this has been achieved with the creation of what is now a dedicated community policing unit, which rolled out towards the mid or close to the end of February of this year. And it is a unit that will consist of initially 26 officers, but obviously those numbers will grow over time. And the community policing unit will be led and is being led by a local commander brought back from retirement, I'm happy to say, someone who's well known to all of us, Inspector Courtney Miles, commonly known as Butch, to some of us, if not most of us. I'm very encouraged by his involvement, but I'm more encouraged with the presence that a dedicated community policing initiative will mean to the communities in the Cayman Islands. 10 officers will be spread throughout the district of Georgetown in various constituencies, and similar numbers in other communities, whether it be from East End to North Side, Bordentown to West Bay. Again, 26 officers initially, but those officers and those numbers are expected to grow as the new additional staff comes online. Again, also included in the $270 million, some infrastructure improvements. We've talked, of course, about the need for a new police headquarters for the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. We are looking at a number of initiatives to make this happen, obviously moving them out of central Georgetown into a building which will be retrofitted for their needs. We've estimated that the cost is somewhere in the region of about $4 million we can get away with doing. Obviously, a lot more affordable than starting from scratch, going out and buying land and then building the building itself. There are a number of commercial buildings that have either been sold or repurposed in the Cayman Islands, and we believe that we can repurpose one of the corporate buildings that will still offer a central location, but can be retrofitted to fit the need of increasing square footage, which will, of course, give the police the resources they need in order to do their job. To do things like obviously improving the holding cells, which has a security component for the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, and protecting our citizens. So that is included in the $270 million budget that has been approved for crime. On the bigger picture, because as we say, crime impacts all of us, but we're seeing changes in the face of crime in terms of the criminals who go about it. Now they're using guns, not just handguns, but in some cases assault rifles. And we have to be cognizant as to how these items get into our country, a country that doesn't manufacture it, a country where, again, gun ownership is still very restricted to society itself. So we are looking towards the creation of what will be a dedicated border protection agency, which will begin with the merging of immigration and customs. Now, we've started to see the initial stages of this merger are starting to take place, particularly at the airports, where we're obviously creating the advanced passenger identification system and fast-tracking for passengers coming to and from Miami. And obviously the rules of immigration and customs are largely they do a lot of the same things, so it was a natural concept of bringing those two agencies together. But the Border Protection Agency will begin with the merging of immigration and customs. Over time, residents can expect to see a single uniform. A new uniform will be designated for this combined resource. And their jobs, of course, will be protecting our seaports, our airports, and, of course, the surrounding waters that obviously surround all three Cayman Islands. As part of the Border Protection Agency, we also envision the establishment of a national Coast Guard, which, of course, we hope will be headed also by a local commander, a Caymanian, at the helm. We believe that National Coast Guard will fit very nicely with our maritime history, an opportunity to, again, perhaps correct the misgivings of wayward use, but at the same token also prevent the smuggling of drugs, guns, and, of course, people into the Cayman Islands. The National Coast Guard will also provide better search and rescue alternatives at sea. So these are some of the areas where the government has sought to follow through on its campaign promises to addressing crime. We wish there was one magic recipe to deal with all of it, but there just isn't. So there are a number of moving parts. Obviously, it'll take some time to make these initiatives a reality. We're working with, on the Coast Guard side of things, we're working with I think it's a member of the UK Coast Guard, Mr. Phil Bostock, who's providing guidance and advice on the establishment of that Coast Guard. What makes the Coast Guard different, though, from whether it be the policing efforts that already exists or the border control, border security assets that will exist, will be that we hope that to create an independent body in the National Coast Guard, who will have the powers of arrest, the powers to detain vessels at sea, the power to search vessels at sea. The key component here will be the Caymanian participation in this exercise. As you are aware, internal security or external security has largely been the remit of the governor and the Crown. The Premier, most recently in the Legislative Assembly, just a week ago, sought to bridge that gap. And of course, he was referring to changes that need to take place at the National Security Council level, where elected representatives are held responsible for crime in their areas, when in reality, All we do is approve the funding, and the police are largely left to come up with their own strategies, which, of course, they're guided by the governor's office. The premier alluded to section, I think it's 58.4 in the 2009 Constitution, that saw the role of the National Security Council being a shared responsibility between both the governor, the crown, as well as the elected officials. We haven't quite gotten there yet. The issue of internal and external security has been a closely guarded privilege that only the governor and the crown have so far been involved in. But we believe that success can only be achieved if those powers are devolved and shared. Whilst we appreciate the skills and expertise of some of the officers that come and join the RCIPS, their urban police tactics, again, crime and the face of crime has changed significantly in the Cayman Islands, and so too must our tactics of addressing them. But in a lot of cases, a lot of the crime is homegrown, and we know these individuals. We know where some of the areas in which they congregate don't form part of any traditional map. Things like Goat Yard in West Bay or otherwise. You won't find that on any map. You certainly won't find it on GPS. But local resources can identify where this is. Local resources can identify the persons and the historical context of those persons. So we believe to be successful on the broader scope of crime, it has to be a shared responsibility between both the Crown and, of course, the local efforts. And certainly the elected officials must have a role to play in this. Certainly not at the operational level, because we accept that at the operational level there should be certain restrictions and divisions. But at the strategic planning and oversight levels, I believe not only the elected officials, but local Caymanians have a role that can be played that will result in a positive outcome.
And that there's no one better than the premier who knows exactly what the objectives of creating a National Security Council was all about, because he was a major part of the constitutional negotiations. And we know in sitting down and talking with the minister who had responsibility for the overseas territories at that time, along with Mr. Ian Hendry and Susan Dixon, exactly what was envisaged.
Yes.
Now, what happened in practice since then is another story altogether. Because ideally, for instance, the Commissioner of Police should be reporting to the National Security Council on the state of security in the Cayman Islands, the state of crime in the Cayman Islands.
Yes.
The National Security Council should be given the type of advice to help to formulate policy as to how to strategize and how to, how to address the whole issue of crime, and that isn't happening. Now, do we have any sort of a roadmap moving forward in terms of how do we get the UK, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, to relent and to devolve additional powers or responsibility to local authorities?
It is an exercise. I've been in office for 9 months, but I've discovered that even after the 2009 Constitution order was made, and the role of the governor, particularly in cabinet, changed significantly. Whilst we had a new document, it seemed as if governors of the past either hadn't read that document or didn't care about that document or otherwise, because the governor was still chairing and having a significant role in the cabinet operation of things. So likewise, I think the National Security Council is something that, we're changing the methodology and the shared powers and responsibility from that which has existed since time immemorial to, again, a newer model. And it's going to take some time.
Okay.
We
have one caller. Paul, do you want to take the caller before we go to the break? Let's take the caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. For the Record.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
And good morning to Mr. to Austin. Mr. Harris.
That's good. Austin is good. Good morning to you, Mr. McField. Always a pleasure to hear from you.
McField here.
Yes, sir.
Well, I am glad that the government has finally accepted and adopted some of the things that I have been saying for years and years and years. One of them is that we should have a combined uniformed force to form a coastal security. I have been saying that over and over and over and over. And I'm glad that the government has finally adopted some of the things that I have been saying on the radio. I think the last time that I was there, when I was there and Mr. Clifford came on, I suggested it to him also that there should be a combined uniform branch with the customs immigration. You should not be leaving it to the police because that's not really a police. That's not really a police
function.
A police effort. It's usually in every other jurisdiction. It is the people who is the customs and immigration who controls border controls. That's number one. Number two, I think you stated about more participation into the security of the country. But I have been advocating. I think the last time I was there, I was very adamant also about Section 55 of the Constitution. I think Section 55 is the one that you probably want to refer to, where it says, Section 55 too, where it says that the Premier can ask the governor to transfer any of the objects, any of the things that the government has under Section 55. That means defense, police, security to a member of cabinet, because that's the only way we are going to get control of how the police do their work and control of our societies around the Cayman Islands. We're not going to get it by putting this or that person on the National Security Council. It's only going to be when an elected member of the government and cabinet has that responsibility, because only then will you have people who knows the country and who knows the people in the country and who is interested in having security in the country. You're not going to get it by people you pay from outside. Thirdly, I don't agree with the government going and buying a building or renting a building for the police station. It's going to be the same thing 10, 15, or 20 years from now. What the government needs to do, it needs to have smaller police stations around the country in different locations, like they do in America and England. They have precincts. They have precincts where you have the police present in certain areas of the country. You're going to build up another bureaucracy when you have some building. A building is not the building per se; it's the presence of the police in the neighborhoods. And I would suggest that in certain parts of Georgetown, for instance, in Windsor Park, you should have a police station there. You should have a police station up on Shaden Road. You should have a police station in different areas of the country. Break the police up so that their presence are felt in the different areas. To go and get another building and fit it out in 10, 15 years, it's going to be the same as this building, and then you have to move and get another building and another building and another building. It's not the big building. It's the police presence in the neighborhood. And I hope that you will take that on board and you take that back to the people who you work for, and more importantly, to get people's input from the communities in which the police has to work.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. McField, for that. Thank you very much. We're going to take a commercial break now. When we return, Mr. Harris, you'll have an opportunity to respond to those suggestions made by Dr. McField. Please stay tuned, folks, for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In studio with me this morning is MLA and Councillor Mr. Austin Harris. Before we get to responding to Dr. McField, I'll just add one more to the list. And this person says, good morning. He says, I know that Barkers at West Bay is not the remit of Mr. Harris, but could he elaborate on why the road was not repaired for the Easter holiday camping season? Thank you.
All right. Certainly, as the writer pointed out, not necessarily direct responsibility. Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that question, but I can commit myself to finding the answer for you and OC getting that information to you as quickly as within the next 24 hours, hopefully. It's simply a matter of reaching out to the right persons.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to, first of all, I want to thank Dr. McField for the call. I think a number of significant comments made, and I thank him for taking the time. Certainly, starting with the last thing first, he talked about a number of satellite policing outposts as opposed to, building in-use central headquarters. Certainly, it's something that the government agrees with. I particularly campaigned about creating a police outpost within my constituency of Prospect. What that would do would obviously reduce the response times. In other words, allow the police to get to the wider community faster. It will, of course, also have a deterrent impact by obviously having greater policing presence within some of our communities. It is something that I support, but there can be no question that the administrative building, which is the police central headquarters in Georgetown, has outlived its purposes. Whether it be the break-ins or otherwise, or whether it be the cells that were previously condemned many, many moons ago, it has outlived its usefulness. But we have two options that we can explore. We can either take the from scratch approach, which you're looking at $25 million easy to retrofit or to build from the ground up a building, or we can acknowledge that the changing face of Central Georgetown, we see a number of commercial buildings moving out of Central Georgetown, maybe because of parking or otherwise, and going to other parts of the Cayman Islands. Those buildings are still intact. Their structure is still sound. They simply just can be retrofitted. So we can meet the need of the space requirements without having to break the bank. Dr. McField also talked about Section 55.2 in the Constitution, which allows the Premier to request of the Governor to devolve certain powers that the Crown has and give that to an elected member. Whilst it is in the Constitution, there will be, like we talked about earlier on, the Constitution also removed the authority of the Governor from the Cabinet in the elected arena, in the decision-making, the policy-making position. But the last governor, Duncan Taylor, and others acted as if that document didn't exist because it simply had not changed over to the devolved situation. So everything takes time, which is why we believe to make it happen, to make that devolved power sort of settle in on the mind of the Crown, the UK, the governors, and all of that, we have to start with the National Security Council. Section 58.4 of the Cayman Islands Constitution reads, and if I can just read it briefly,
Sure.
It says, "The National Security Council shall advise the governors on matters relating to internal security, with the exception of operational and staffing matters, and the governor shall be obliged to act in accordance with the advice of the council unless he or she considers that giving effect to the advice would adversely affect Her Majesty's interest, whether in respect to the United Kingdom or the Cayman Islands. And where the governor has acted otherwise than in accordance with the advice of the council, he or she shall report to the council at the next meeting." Now, that's important because it takes us sort of the baby steps approach to devolving the powers that have existed since time immemorial. We accept and acknowledge that policing, internal and external security, has been entirely the remit of the governor and the United Kingdom, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. But that changed in 2009. But as we have seen, nothing changed overnight. And there's still many who are operating under the older policies, and we have to encourage those changes to take place. First, we saw the changes in cabinet. That took almost 4 years under the previous administration. But again, I give credit to the Premier, Honourable Alden McLaughlin, for obviously digging in his heels and using the Constitution as it is intended as the ultimate law of the country. Likewise, the National Security Council is made up of the Premier, the Leader of the Opposition, 2 ministers, 2 members of the public, the Governor, and others, and the Police Commissioner. In that makeup, it is intended to create a shared responsibility where the police commissioner and the governor are obliged and shall take into consideration the advice and strategies and opinions shared to it by the elected members. And we believe that is, again, a more effective approach. If we can accomplish that, and we will accomplish that because it is the law. It is simply for the other parties to accept it as such. But once we can accomplish that, then certainly Section 55.2 becomes much easier arrangement to also play out in accordance with the Constitution and the requests of the people.
Now, with the imminent arrival of the new governor, and we know that he's coming with instructions from the FCO to a certain extent.
Yes.
We know that he would have been briefed also by the outgoing governor also.
Yes.
But it certainly would be useful, I believe, for the premier to sit with the new governor, if he hasn't already done so, to sound him out on some of these contentious issues that we've faced with other governors in terms of the direction that he intends to take. We will then get some idea of whether or not it is an initiative that he can take on his own, or whether or not he's following instructions from the FCO. We have one caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
I'm going to get you an ID caller so you can know what I'm calling, okay? Good morning, Mr. Austin.
Good morning to you, Ms. Jan. How are you?
I am fine.
Excellent. Good to hear from you. Thank you for your call.
Yes, I know you're brand new in the house.
Yes, ma'am.
I want you not to go in there and pick up the habit of it takes time, because in these governments that's in there has been in there for donkey years, and if they can't see what needs to be fixed, you or nobody else going to get it fixed. I appreciate what you're doing, but do not go in there and fall for this thing. It takes time, and it's been in there already, and the government that is in there now has been there, and they're not doing anything much. I know you're trying to do what you can do, but believe me, your hand just as tied as me and OC hands is tied. I just wanted to say to Mr. Maxfield, I agree with him, what he was saying. But the first thing, you know what they're going to say? Oh, Cayman is too small to house so many precincts in this island. But you let me tell you something. In years to come, we're going to wish we had a precinct in every corner of this island. But that's not what I called for. But anyhow, I want to ask you, Mr. O'Steen, probably Austin can help me. I drove through Southtown yesterday, looking at the construction that's going to be going on there. Now you want to tell me that they couldn't just wait until the after Easter weekend to go and do what they're going to do, knowing that our locals go up there and pitch tent for almost a week. And I want to know where those guys are going this week to pitch their tent. They could have given one more chance up there. You understand? One more chance to pitch their tent this year and start that construction work right after Easter. I believe that was all a setup. I die with that in my heart. But I just want to say that I hope that down by the governor's beach and the governor's residence, it ain't going to be no ton of security, and I can't go there situation when we get our new governor. And if it happens, I want to say to my Caymanian, you all need to wake up, because if you all don't wake up, you all will be voting every 4 years for nothing. Enough is enough. I am sick and tired of how we are being treated on this island. And Mr. O.C.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know if this tunnel by the Royal Palms, do you know how many lanes that's going to have? You can stick a pin there and answer me when I hang up. I don't want to take my time from me. I want to know, why can't they go back in there and see that those lights they have in there is not sufficient? I saw a gentleman a couple of days ago riding in the lane. A car was ahead of him, a big old truck behind him, and if that person ahead of him had a clock brake, that gentleman would be dead on that bicycle. Up in there is too dark.
This is the one on the old 7 Mile Beach Road?
Right,
Yeah.
Okay.
yes. I would love to know how many lanes are going there, because it's not too many can go there, and it's going to still bottleneck back into one problem when you get down to the gas station or further into the 7 mile stretch. I just want to say that that tunnel, I didn't know if the first one was being built look like how this one looked, that is so disgusting and irritating and stressful. I hope it wasn't the same. You know what I mean? But this one looked ridiculous. I know when I put all the lights and the paint on it, it's going to look beautiful, whatever the case may be. But Austin, where are our emergency exits for when we got to come in, going to West Bay, or West Bay want to come into Georgetown? Why are we putting all these tunnels on our main entrance into West Bay and into Georgetown, and we have no other alternative that I know of right now? We got to put a pin somewhere, Austin.
How's the garbage situation in your area, the pickup? I read earlier the schedule and everything.
They came in this morning apparently and picked it up.
Okay.
And there's no excuse for garbage being picked up in Cayman either, because when they go to make a budget every year, our trucks should be maintained properly and we should have sufficient trucks. I know a bus company right now, if their bus break down, they got to back up. Why can't we get back up in our garbage truck? Let me tell you something, Mr. O, so I'm going to let you go. This morning, a government truck almost took the school bus down.
Wow.
Why? But I'll leave you at that. You all have a great one. Austin?
Yes, ma'am.
You do what you have to do, but you do it the best you can, and don't go in there and dally on people. It's going to take time, because they got to wiggle you in, and you got to get nothing done, honey. You got to stand for them or get out.
Well,
thank you.
You're more than welcome.
Darling.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
All I know how to do is my very best, and certainly that is what I am trying to achieve. Certainly, it was one of the reasons why you picked up. I accepted the role of the whip, because it allowed me access to all of the government objectives. We have 8 strategic goals, and one of my reasons for accepting that position was to ensure that those 8 strategic goals are completed. We go through 4 years, election cycle after election cycle, and to Ms. Jan's point, promises go unfulfilled. That has not been the case in the 9 months that I've been there. Again, we're talking about crime. Every MLA that is now elected during the campaign trail committed themselves to addressing crime in some way or the other for creating safer communities. We got elected in May. We got a budget approved in November, and by February, the Safer Communities Initiative, with the creation of a dedicated police neighborhood community policing unit, is a reality. Additional resources to the police services in terms of personnel is a reality. Additional infrastructure resources coming online. The devolvement of powers to do a better job at border protection is starting to happen. So we're delivering on those promises, and we're only 9 months in. I know there are going to be challenges. I know that we're not always going to, receive favor with everyone, including the last caller, but we're going to do our best. To her questions, first of all, starting with the boardwalk on South Sound, why not wait until after the Easter break? As I understand it from my previous attendance on this program, that's been a project that's been waiting for 2 years. Whilst there are certain members of callers to this program that say, where's the information? Apparently there's been a lot of information. There have been articles published in the newspaper. Members of the communities that are going to be impacted by it obviously have been involved in the discussions, and there have been no objections. So the objections that are coming from outside of the constituency, if you will. However, I've also spoken with both Councillor Barbara Connolly and Minister Roy McTaggart, who where the starting point is taking place on South Sound Beach itself is shared between Georgetown East and Georgetown South. Okay. They are actively engaging some of the critics to the discussion. I've also spoken to Minister Joey Hugh, who's Minister of Planning, and he's on his way back, or arrived back from Hong Kong just last night. So if we give him 24 or 48 hours to deal with the jet lag, that is as a result of that, I think we can satisfy the public in terms of more information. But there have been wide discussions on this boardwalk for a period of 2 years, and it has been delayed for 2 years. So whether they started after Easter or before Easter with a 2-year hanging point on us that this could have started 2 years ago, it really is a matter of available funding and getting it off the ground.
Now, when I saw it last, there were barriers that were fencing that was put up there, but no actual work had been done in the area that she's talking about, where the camping normally is done. Now, Mark, mind you, the road surface has been shifted slightly towards the north.
Mm-hmm.
They've partially paved some of that road surface to widen it more towards the north.
Yes.
Because the south side is part of that is closed off. But I don't think that any actual work has taken place yet. Whether or not it is possible to remove that temporary fencing that is there to allow the picnicking to go on for the weekend. Because I'm sure that no work is going to be done during the holiday period. But the roads were narrow in that area
before,
as it were,
right
before. Even more narrower now that the work has been done.
I think it's a fair request to ask Phoenix Construction, who are doing the work, to obviously remove those barriers during the Easter weekend when there will be no work taking place. I believe also, to your point, that the barriers exist not necessarily because the construction work has gone down, but obviously the cleanup of the area has to occur first.
Yeah.
And maybe they're a little overambitious with the parameters of those fencing. But again, I think it was intended to ensure safety for those persons who are doing the cleanup, the prep of the area before the construction starts. But certainly, to your point, I don't think it's too much of a big request to say, Easter weekend is coming up this weekend. If it's not, a major hazard, can we remove the fencing just for the period of 4 days? I don't think that's a big ask.
Okay. We missed one of our commercial breaks, so we're going to take a early break before the 9 o'clock headline news. Folks, please stay tuned. Remember, the phone lines are open. We've been getting some interesting questions and comments as well, and we welcome more of those when we return from headline news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. It is my pleasure to have in the studio with me this morning none other than MLA Mr. Austin Harris. He's also a counselor in the Premier's Ministry of Human Resources, Immigration and Community Affairs. We're going straight to the phone lines. I think we have a couple of callers on hold. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Very fine. Good morning, MLA Harris.
Good morning, Mr. Adam.
Mr. Harris, first thing I want to do is to thank you after you were contacted probably about 2 weeks ago now on the subject of what was occurring on the South Sound Road. As a result of your whipping, however, you need to get a stronger whip, and maybe you need to get a cat on 18 tails.
Cow cod? How about cow cod?
No, that's only one at a time. Because when you swung the whip, only one of the MLAs, is there any evidence that that person did anything as a result of your contacting them after you were contacted?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in regards to what they have done and the way it's going to affect, personally, I'm one that walks the beach, or what's left of it. It's rocky. And I walk the seaside, let me put it that way down there.
Yes, sir.
Not only have they put blockages on the roadside to block the access of people to get under the trees, but for the whole length, they've dug up and they have a 4-foot high netting that prevents you from getting to walking along there properly. So if kids want to run up and down and play for Easter, they got to contend with this, with the stick sticking up and all this kind of stuff. Kids are not going to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Totally ignoring Caymanians. Again, knowing what Caymanians are doing. And that's why I keep saying government in many respects is not for Caymanians. Now, you said that there's been discussion. Yes, I've heard things in the press. Where have the plans been displayed? And the details. When was the meeting on site or in South Sound Community Center? When? I never heard of it. I would have attended. I make it my business to try and understand what's going on in the Cayman Islands when different things are coming up. So that is a weak, lame excuse, sir. And I would say to you, remember the definition of what a diplomat is when sent abroad. A good person sent abroad to try and explain away bad things for their country and government. Don't be a diplomat.
Well, they can explain good things too, as well. Not
No.
just the bad things.
No, but I'm saying don't try and explain away the situation that they have created there for this upcoming weekend, which is bad. Mm-hmm. No, any way you cut it, slice it, or dice it. They have already removed and dug out some of the coconut trees. They've dug out and removed away with backhoes the grape tree bushes that were there. They're threatening. They've already cut down some of the casuarina trees. They're laying in a pile. You can see them down there. And it's total disregard. We know what they did at the dock to facilitate the developers of the condominiums opposite who wanted a view. Big, mature casuarina trees that survived Ivan. They cut them down. They didn't survive the developer, but they survived Ivan. So I'm asking you, sir, please, pay attention. And they need to pay attention in the other areas of Cayman where there's moves to take away public right-of-ways and areas for camping. I want to change, sir, and jump over.
We have three persons queued up.
Okay, Mr. O.C., I appreciate that, sir. I'll try to be fast.
Very quickly.
But you see, if government was doing what they should do, we wouldn't have to talk about these things on radio.
Mm-hmm, but a lot more people want to talk.
And, okay, in regards to prison, sir, last week in the newspaper, the director of prisons is saying the prison is full. That has been a case for many years, way beyond what its design capacity was. Now, one of the things that I would suggest, and having worked with organizations at the prison to try and make the Cayman prison the first smoke-free prison in the Caribbean, and moved along a certain ways, and then it came to a stop. But we're looking at the consumption of the illegal substances as to why people are in there. I don't know the number today, but I've known the number in the past. Take a look at the number of people that are there that have been there on more than one occasion for the same offense that they're back there again. And the substances that they were using on the outside are freely available within the prison walls. I have relatives that have been in there. Those relatives, some of them get it from the prison guards. And when the prison guards don't have it, those people share it with the prison guards. They come and ask for a draw. Now, the testing is an easy way to find out how clean the prison staff are. The level of testing that should be done to know where people are, at least to know how much. You mightn't be able to stop it, but at least to know where it is not done on a relative, consistent basis. It started to be published, but the authorities in the glass house were so embarrassed as to the percentage of people that had illegal substances in their system that they stopped the publishing of those reports on a monthly basis. I'll leave you with that, sir. God bless you. And I've ordered the 19-tail whip for you to be able to use on the rest of them, because the one you use is not working on a lot of them.
Thank you very much, caller.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yeah, OC,
Yes, ma'am.
I had a call back
Okay.
in regards to, trying to probably go there for a little while and take some of the fencing down. But Mr. Billy beat me to it. They have a lot of digging up on the grounds already down. They can't even go down there and do nothing. They got the sand all sparkle up, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
But often, because it's been in the making for the last 2 years, and because of finance and so forth. But is it true that is this a government project or just a private investor doing this boardwalk? Because I was on the radio talking about it some time ago, and I called on the radio when he was on there and asked him about it. And he said that yes, it's all of us good news. And what his restriction was, he said, was no going to be no loud music, and there will be no selling of any items on the beach. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to know who building that. Is the government building it, or a private entity building that, and it's going to be more convenient for all those condos on the left-hand side going east, because often, if that's not going to be suitable and available for us at any hour that we want to go there, where are we going to go? I'll leave it at that. You can answer me when I hang up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. One more caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. Oh, we've lost that caller. And I have a message here, but it's very similar to what the last caller mentioned as well. It says, it was just mentioned that Phoenix Construction is the entity responsible for the construction of the South Sound Boardwalk project. Is this a private project? If not, how is it that the government is not doing the project?
Again, the information that I have is that it is a private boardwalk that is being constructed by a private entity. Mm-hmm. The only reason I stated the name Phoenix is because you see their signs attached to the fencing all across South Sound.
Okay.
To the callers, whilst I acknowledge your concerns, I think it is notable to point out that these concerns are coming from outside of that neighborhood. These two persons who are calling in criticizing the building don't live in the surrounding areas. We acknowledge that there is a planning process. Anytime you build a building, whether it be a shed or a house, you've got to send out notices. And these notices have been sent out to those adjacent landowners during this entire period. And of course, the law also creates an opportunity for objections to be made. Mm-hmm. So if we follow the law that has existed since time immemorial on building or otherwise, then all of those who would be negatively affected or impacted by this boardwalk would have already had an opportunity to offer their criticism, their objections, or otherwise. Again, I'm not as strongly familiar in the historical context over the last 2 years, but there have been articles, there have been discussions, there have been meetings. In terms of the plans, I'm not aware of any plans being posted anywhere, but certainly I can seek to get that information and encourage not only the representatives in those two constituents, but also the private developer to unveil those plans for the public to see. Again, we've already talked about the desire to have some of the fencing and the netting taken down for the Easter long weekend, and I don't believe that's a huge ask, and I'm sure it's something that we can remedy in relatively short order. Likewise...
But in one breath, they're saying they would like that to happen, but in another breath, they're saying even if that happens, that most of the beach there is not usable because it's being dug up. So it's kind of questionable in terms of what they really, what is it that they really want to see.
Quite right, exactly. And again, it's always easier to criticize than it is to beautify. And I think that boardwalk initiative is intended to beautify that stretch of beach, to protect it in some degree, to ensure that we don't, because I remember there was a time when a developer wanted to, develop way past the water line, destroy the beach altogether, take out the mangroves, and then that would eliminate anything for pedestrians or beach users whatsoever.
And cut a canal through
and cut a canal through, exactly. So, I mean, whilst I hear the callers, and those same two callers who are criticizing this boardwalk were heavily criticizing the canal project back then as well. Mm-hmm. We need to make some improvements to our areas and take into consideration the needs of pedestrians and beach users as well as residents.
And when it was introduced by former Minister D. Kurt Tibbetts, that was what it is all about. And one of the things that was recognized then was the amount of people who use that corridor for cycling, for jogging, simply for walking their dogs in the morning.
Exactly.
And that was the whole purpose of developing that area. And I think at that point in time, he did indicate that they were seeking private participation in that as well.
Indeed. Yes. So, again, we're used to the criticism when things are in the construction phases. But if you give it some time, you will see that this development is intended to create that balance between the needs of the homeowners and the landowners in the area, but also to beautify and to protect these areas for use by everyone. So again, I take on board the criticisms, but those criticisms are coming from persons who don't reside within the immediate area. I also take on board the recommendation that obviously their concerns require some answers. And again, I will address the issue with Minister Hugh, who's Minister of Planning, and the other two MLAs, MLA Connolly and MLA McTaggart, have also been involved in the discussions, and certainly we will do what we can to satisfy the two critics. But the bigger picture is those who reside in that area, that process has already run its course, and everyone is satisfied to see this construction begin.
Okay, we have 3 callers. Paul, can we take 1 call before the break and then 2 after the break? First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hello?
Good morning.
Sorry, sir. I have to call back, Mr. Austin. I'm sorry, sir, but I have to disagree 1,000% with some of what you just said. Number one, you talk about the people in the area. One has to remember that in times past, before developers took control of government, when something was arising, let's say, I can't think of it right now, but something occurring in a different area than where you live, the public were able to have a say and to put in their comments on it. That area has been reduced. Now it is 250 feet for some things from where the development is taking place. So the government have reacted to developers and tried to stifle the views and the comments of Caymanians throughout. That is why not one quarry in the Cayman Islands is within the heavy industrial zone where it should be. Now, as regards what happened up there, yes, I'm saying it yes again. There have been words and talks about it. When have the plans ever been shown? And that area, as Ms. Osi rightly said, and you have said, I think, it's an area that's used by people from all area in Cayman. So don't try to discount people that live from out of the area and how they feel. Please don't. Because that's disrespectful for the other people. People that might live in East End, and when they take their lunch break, they take their salad or food they brought home, and they go up there, and they used to sit under the trees and be able to have their lunch and look out at the trees, be able to relax a little bit and see nature in all its glory.
And you're saying that they should have equal voice as those persons who live in that area?
Most definitely.
Okay.
What the government did with the planning law when government took control of them. Mm-hmm. And when you look at even the report that was done by the Auditor General talking about the constitution of the planning board and the highly suspected corruption that goes on there, this government, same people that's there now, reappointed everybody back there.
Mm-hmm. Caller, you're going to have to leave us. You're going to have to leave us there, though. Caller, you're going to have to leave us there.
Don't try and make good for bad.
You're going to have to leave us there. We have to take a break, and we have a couple of callers on hold as well. Folks, please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. We're on our last leg of the show this morning. Unfortunately, time flies when you're having interesting fun. We still have 1 caller, Paul. We have 2 callers, and we have a voice note as well. Why don't we play the voice note first, Paul?
Good morning, For the Record. I just have one question this morning, and that is, I would like to know what the plan is that the government has, or anyone, but the government in particular has, to clean this country up and to keep it clean, to clean up, get all that roadside litter up, and also all the illegal dumping, and also for people who do not keep their private premises clean. I would like to know what is the plan, and what else? I guess that's my question. What is the plan? When is it going to be implemented? When are we going to keep this country clean again? Thank you. Bye.
We want to thank that caller very much. And Mr. Harris has taken note of that. We're going to take the other 2 callers. After that, I think, Paul, we'll close the mic off because we'll the phone lines off. Sorry, not the mic. We close the phone lines off so to give Mr. Harris an opportunity to respond. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Oh, see?
Yes, ma'am.
I couldn't help but call back, but Mr. Adams beat it before me.
Okay.
I just want to say that I am not relating to Mr. Adams this morning. I don't have his phone number. I'm not drinking coffee with him. I'm home mopping my house floor. But Austin, sweetheart, I love you to death. But in regards to we not living in the area, I raised up in South Sound and Walker's Road. I knew what South Sound was when I was a kid. We ran through that like hot water, looking for Christmas trees and so forth. And we not here criticizing nobody who wants to build that place. I don't come out here. The government don't need to come out and see that's garbage that's making us make believe that they are building it. And I'm not being hard on you. I'm just upset to the fact that we are here. You say we're here criticizing. These two are criticizing. We are not criticizing. We want answers. We have to live here. We don't have nowhere to go. We have absolutely no way to go when it comes to leaving this island. This is where we're born, and this is where we're going to die. My neighbor's street between Walker's Road and South Sound. So I just want to say this morning that I am not criticizing no company, but the facts remain. Don't come out here and feed us no foolishness and no negativeness and no truth of who is doing things in this Cayman Islands. Although we don't like it, no, we don't have no other choice but take it in, because then our government, past, present, and future, will continue to do what they are doing. So me and Adam not drinking no coffee this morning. I don't know his phone number. It just happened that we're on the same page, and we raised up in South Sound. Thank you so much for your time. And, thank you, Austin. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, caller. Last caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. O.C. and Mr. Harris.
Good morning, Captain Paul.
This is Paul Hurston from South Sound. You're speaking of real South Sound now.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Captain Paul.
Yeah. My concern is, why are they not trying to do something about that discharge that's coming out, that drain that's coming out from Randite Gardens? That is a health hazard. The filth is coming down. I can take you up there and show you where it comes down. When that is overflowing, you can't use the beach. You can't use the beach. It goes down. I don't know why the people who don't complain about that. It flows right down. It comes out through the channel by the Black Coral Man place there. It accumulates there, and it is stink. It is stink. Now they're building this, and I am born and raised in South Sound, and I have no idea. I have never heard. It was no public
consultation
about this thing. I don't know. In fact, they change everything, because that is Red Bay now. That is not South Sound anymore. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
South Sound begin at the crossroad from Old Crew Road down to Denham Thompson Way when I was a boy. So the people in South that's in the Red Bay area now. That's called Red Bay. That's not South Sound anymore. Okay. But I think it's and I'm going to say this, and I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for it, but it won't be long before the launching ramp is going to be removed. That's the big plan. They ain't telling you about that, but that's going to be removed in a short while, because that big construction cost. But they didn't want the willow trees there to cut them down. Say the road was destroying the road, which is a lie. Because I went up there and inspected it, and there was no crack in the road. And so the launching ramp is going to be gone now, and. So I'm getting a little worked up, so I better leave it at that. Have a good day.
Thank you very much, Captain Paul. Mr. Harris, the mic is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. You know, what both callers, Mr. Adam and Ms. Thompson, and of course highlighted again by Captain Paul, have been answered. They've asked to see a plan for what the broader boardwalk would look like. And I believe that's a reasonable request, and I will certainly commit to them that I'll go back, particularly with the Minister of Planning, and see if that plan can be unveiled for the general public consumption. I think it's a reasonable request. It didn't take 3 calls each to make that point. They've asked for some flexibility during the Easter weekend. I also believe that is not an unreasonable ask, and certainly will commit myself to going back and asking if that is possible, and certainly sharing that information with you as soon as possible. In terms of the no public consultation, again, I have to respectfully disagree with the 3 callers. Perhaps there has been no recent public discussion on this particular project, but it has spanned 2 years. Again, I don't have the specific dates that articles were issued in the press, with commentary from a number of persons. But again, I'm happy to get that information and provide it to you, or otherwise encourage the Minister of Planning, Minister Hugh, or the MLA for Georgetown South, Councillor Barbara Connolly, or MLA for Georgetown East, which is Minister Roy McTaggart, to also share some comments as it relates to the issues being aired this morning by the two callers predominantly. So I take on board their comments and their concerns, and I'll get back to them with the answers that they seek. But I simply stated that, again, I think it's a little unfair, as we use the analogy for a person who lives in East End to be able to offer comment and to fundamentally stop a project that is going on in South Sound or Red Bay when the adjacent homeowners or landowners have not made similar objections. Otherwise, we will never get anything accomplished. And yes, I hear the concerns, the nostalgic viewpoints of, leaving Cayman as old Cayman. Unfortunately, that horse has long left the gate. We just simply won't go back to those days. But give it some time. Maybe this boardwalk will fit the bill, will provide an avenue for pedestrians and beach users and walkers and as pedestrians to utilize this area, which has always been heavily utilized, and that there will be a happy balance between everyone. But stopping it altogether, I think, is unreasonable. To the voice note, the person asking, when is a plan to clean up the country and keep it clean? Certainly, this is an initiative that is very important to me in Prospect. And since being elected and working in conjunction with the Prospect Community Group, we have engaged in a number of cleanup projects that have involved members of the community. How do we keep it clean? Again, we keep it clean by members of communities taking responsibility for themselves and their own properties. A lot of the trash, particularly in Prospect, that may be seen on the roadsides, started from somebody's garbage container that didn't have a lid on it. The dogs and the chickens got into it, and then they carried them down the road. It's always easier to say, it's somebody else's responsibility, but in many cases, we have the responsibility and the ability to keep our areas clean. We just have to accept that in ourselves.
It has to be a collaborative effort.
Very much so. I take on board, there's a recommendation for the inclusion of signs, no littering signs, particularly along the east-west or the Prospect bypass. I think signs have value, but I also believe that until we actually prosecute some people for littering, I think we have had a littering fine of $500 for littering since I was a child, and I don't recall a single time where anyone has actually been prosecuted for that. I think the illegal dumping is an area and an opportunity that needs to be nipped in the bud. Again, I'm not sure whether or not there will be a national cleanup plan or more so a constituent cleanup plan, as we have now 19 constituencies. Just this past weekend, I spoke to a community member who, they were looking at establishing on a volunteer basis simply companies that have the equipment, a grab truck, and other companies that have trucks, loading trucks, that they would go around once every weekend and just collect the trash that had been, accumulated in some of these illegal dumping sites and taking them off the road. They wouldn't do it for money. They wouldn't do it for praise, but they would simply do it for love of country because it's the right thing to do. Again, I applaud that kind of initiative by members of our community, Caymanians who care about our community, just doing it because it's the right thing. Not because it makes them money or because they'll get accolades for it, but doing it just because it is the right thing. The illegal dumping, nobody likes it. I saw it just this past weekend, again, in an area of Prospect. We dealt with it. We had members of the community collecting the garbage and putting it in a central location. I then came along, called somebody, said, please pick this up and take it to the dump. There's nothing stopping us from taking action. Yes, we would like those unsightly behaviors to stop altogether, but that's human nature. And until I think somebody's prosecuted for these offenses, that message simply won't, it won't be received by those who need to hear it. And I think that's all of it. I've made some notes. Of course, the Barkers West Bay Road for the Easter. Again, I'll follow up on that. Again, the Minister for Planning has only recently returned from Hong Kong. Undoubtedly, he's listening, or maybe he's sleeping at this moment. But either way, we will work on getting a plan for this boardwalk, and also immediately after this show, we will start to see what flexibility can be afforded to campers during the Easter break as it relates to the South Sound construction work that is taking place.
Okay, I did some quick research here, and it does appear as if sometime late last year that Phoenix Construction, they were the ones who were contracted to do the work, and it is expected that by the end of June of this year that the work will be completed.
Okay.
You know, on this in the South Sound area. So it does appear as if Phoenix Construction are the contractor of record on there as well.
Well, any plan will obviously have to sit in planning. So we can get that information, and certainly if it is not considered, private information, which it can't be because it's going on otherwise public lands, we can see what we can do about getting that plan in the public domain. I don't think that's a big ask.
Yeah, I do recall though that there may have been an artist's rendition published in the newspaper in terms of what it was supposed to look like, once it was completed.
I remember something like that as well. What I couldn't remember, and I was hesitant to state because we had gone through a number of different plans for that area. You mentioned the canals at one point in time, and I remember seeing an artist's rendition, but what I cannot state definitively is whether that artist's rendition had to do with the canal plan or with this boardwalk plan. But either way, we will work towards getting the information that the callers have requested so that they can be better informed. I'm sure it won't necessarily slow down the criticism. Perhaps it might even fuel the criticism. But, they've made 2 requests, and we're going to do what we can to satisfy those.
And don't forget Captain Paul's comments about the waste coming from the Randike area as well, because that is something that they would want to look into as early as possible. What you don't want to happen is to have the area developed and then that becomes a primary issue after it has been developed. So,
absolutely.
To address it at the same time.
No, I thank all of the callers for their opinions, and most notably Captain Paul, who I have the utmost of respect for. But Miss Jan and Mr. Adam as well, of course.
Okay. I have a WhatsApp message here, but I think it's not necessarily in relation to the show.
Okay.
Something that Paul can look at. Well, Mr. Harris, I want to thank you very much for making yourself available this morning, and just basically want to say open invitation for you.
Thank you, sir.
To come back, and I know that there are plans for you to help to keep the public informed of what's happening, and we hope that we know that you will use this platform as often as you can to do so as well. Folks, I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension For the Record, into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who is less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want or even those who crave. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. Join Sterling Dwayne Banks at 12 noon for Talk Today. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these 3 beautiful, wonderful Cayman Islands.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.